Are you looking for answers? Do you have questions? Do you want the truth? Are you sick of fake content? Well, join me here at Doof Doof Paranormal, and with the help of my friends, I hope to find what we're all looking for, the answers. So this week I went to the South Brisbane Cemetery, established in 1866, but first burial, ready to go, was 1870. They had to expand it quite a few times over the years due to the high amount of demand. That's a picture of the cemetery in 1890. Now, this is a very early picture of the cemetery when it was first established, and as you can see, someone thought it was a really, brilliant, idea to build it on the edge of the riverbank. Rivers, what do? Flood. And flood it does a lot. Over the years it's flooded a fair bit, especially when we've had big floods here in Brisbane. Recently we had a flood, and the cemetery didn't fare too well out of it. As you can see, most of the graves, including what I'm going to talk about later, went under. Friends of the cemetery do a really good job at maintaining it though after these events, which is really good to see. So, yes, walking through the cemetery is a treat at night, very relaxing and calming. However, this particular cemetery, compared to others I've walked through, is so uneven. You've got to just really be careful of your footing. Now, while I was walking through the cemetery, this particular stone was not part of the tour. I just stopped and had a look at it because I was quite fascinated by the lady's face in the stone. I managed to get a photo of it, which I'll pop in here for you to have a look at, but just a magnificent piece of work. Now, this lady's name was Wilhelmina Dorothea Maria Effie, and she had 5 children. She lived in Victoria, and in 1831 she left Victoria as a single mum and came up to Queensland, where, bright as a button she must have been, she established a cafe and made quite a living out of it in Queen Street in Brisbane. Later on she had to move for whatever reasons, and they went into a building in Edward Street. The building's actually still there, which is pretty cool. The son did quite well, so after Wilhelmina died in 1901, she was 70 then, her son William took over, so he managed the cafe. Used to hold 380 guests. Anyway, William ended up selling the building later on to the Rothwells. Now, while I was walking through, I was doing some filming, and I didn't notice a few things until after I re-looked at the videos at home. And this little fella come running out as I ended my video, and I thought, oh, how cute. I'll show my American friends what our little geckos look like. They're tiny little things, pretty cute. So at the end of this little video walkthrough, you'll spy him on the gravestone and run out. I didn't see him at the time. So, as you can see by my wonderful camera work, I am no Jason Spencer, that's for sure. But fair enough, the ground, as you can tell, and look at the stairs. Give me a break. It was really bumpy and lumpy walking through there. I had to really be careful. My camera work will get better, guys, I promise. And there's our little gecko friend. Pretty cute, eh? lots of pretty stones, so many pretty stones, and not there's still people to this day that can be buried there, but it's family descendants, like people who still have the right to be buried there. Quite a few stones like this flat on the ground, open to the elements. And the other thing I wanted to mention to you was that when the floods come through, I noticed while walking through there's a lot of damage done to the stones, obviously, but also to the metal or the iron around the graves. It's primarily due to flood damage. So when trees, etc., debris have floated through the cemetery during a flood, that's what's caused that damage, which is a shame. Now, another anomaly, watch out, it's just a flying fox. So I was walking through and looked at the footage and saw that little critter fly around the edge of a tree. I thought, oh, cool. I wondered what birds were flying at night. There you go, it wasn't, it was a bat. So just remember, when you're walking through a cemetery at night time, just because you hear a squeak or a noise, it doesn't mean it's a ghost. It could be a fruit bat. Now, this is the story that I wanted to tell you. This is a sad story about Alexander Stuart Angus, a Scottish man, captain of a steamer. He was a married man, and he had a little girl called Madeline, who, when she was 11 months old, passed away, which was quite sad, and they say he never truly recovered after the death of that little girl, but he had 5 other children, so I guess he got on with it. But the story is that he was captaining the Leone, which was a steamer, and he would go up and down the Brisbane River and deliver cargo, etc., back and forth. So one night they were travelling back towards Brisbane. The waters had receded slightly, so they came aground upon one of the banks in the river. Captain Angus said, "All right, fellas, we're in for the night. Everyone get some sleep. We'll head off towards Brisbane in the morning when the water comes up." So next morning at about 6 a.m, it said that Captain Angus went to wake up the crew. Well, he woke up the engineer anyway, and he said that he had to kindle the fire, please. Steam had to be up about 6 o'clock, so let's get all hands ready. So the engineer did as he was told, got the fire started, woke up everybody, said, "Come on, fellas." They couldn't find the captain. When they went back into his cabin, he wasn't there, but his watch was, and a gold sovereign. And they thought, geez, that's a bit odd. And everywhere they looked, they hadn't found him. So they set off for help in the Leone and got the authorities back down to where they thought the captain had gone missing. They searched for him everywhere. They had a JP with them, a Mr. Hickson. Finally, after everybody was searching, of all places, they had to drag the river first. That didn't get them any results. They actually ended up finding him face down in front of the Leone, not too far from the bow. Mr. Hickson, who was the JP at the time, he noted that the body was dressed, had his boots, he was fully dressed, but his arms were bent behind the back, as if the deceased had fallen over and was clutching backwards in the fall. Anyway, poor old Angus was taken to the undertaker and later buried at the cemetery, firstly in an unmarked grave apparently, until his wife could get the funds to erect this in his honour. And so along with him, buried in this plot, is his little girl, Madeline. Now my third story for you tonight is about a stone that also was not on the tour, but it sparked my interest. It was standing out there so bright. This gentleman's name is Arthur Cecil Cripps. Arthur Cecil Cripps was born the son of a doctor in Sydney. He became a really great sportsman, and in fact he represented Queensland in the rugby union, and he was also a successful boxer. He was the middleweight champion during 1901 to 1911. He gained a really good reputation actually as a clean boxer, so a courteous opponent. So he was a gentleman. He was an honourable man, as they used to say. During his boxing years, he worked on his farm, so he'd take time off every now and then to join a boxing match. But then, of course, along came World War I. In 1916, he signed up. He was 35 at the time, but he signed up to go and fight in the battle. He thought that that was the right thing to do, so it was time to say goodbye to himself, the boxer. His days with boxing were done. Now he was going to be a soldier. Before he left, they gave him a little bit of a dinner and a farewell. Basically said, "Oh gosh, why mate, you're 35, everybody else is so young." And he said that seeing so many of his friends had gone to the front and suffered in the cause of liberty, he felt that he too had to do the same, or he could never look them in the face. Now that's his beautiful wife and daughter, so he left those girls behind to go and fight, but luckily he came back. Now when he got back, he did some odd jobs. He was a hotel proprietor, he was the chairman of the local football club, director of the dairy company, but before his daughter Violet was 21 years old, he decided to move the family to Brisbane. Unfortunately, Arthur developed cancer of the bowel, and at the young age of 55, he passed away in hospital at the Mater Hospital. He passed away. He was 100 people in pouring rain attended his funeral that day. He was an extremely well thought of man. His wife and daughter attended his funeral, and there he lay, a good man. So this last story is that of Paddy and James Kenneth, the Kenneth brothers, bushrangers, outlaws. Patrick and the rest of his siblings were born to Irish parents. Now his Irish parents were potato farmers back in the day during the days of the famine. They moved to Australia for a better life. They got a lease on some property that was owned by the manager of the Carnarvon station, Mr. Albert Dalkey, and they did their best. But as the boys grew, James here, who was 3 years younger than Paddy, James and Paddy got into a little bit of mischief and started robbing people, robbing coaches, robbing shops, stealing cattle, which of course is a no-no. So they didn't play their cards too well and they got caught. James spent 3 years in the Boggo jail, and Paddy, he got 5. I guess because he was the big brother, the instigator, so they thought. Now, when they got out, the land, while they were in there, Darky and the police took the land back off the parents, so when they got out of prison and came home, they came home to no home because it was gone. So there was an article back in the day about a big fight between Albert and Paddy. A bit of a fisticuffs, like give us our parents' lands back and so on and so forth. No, go to bugger off. Which they did. So they lived in the bush in tents. Wasn't the best of life, I suppose, which led them back again to doing the wrong thing. Stealing cattle, thieving. They had a hideout. No one knew where that was, obviously. But in the end, Doyle was the policeman involved, and he and Darky decided that it was time to go and catch these boys and pop them in jail. So on April the 2nd, 1902, this man here, Mr. Doyle, and the fellow you saw before with the horse, Albert Darky, took themselves and a tracker called Sam Johnson, and decided to go and approach the camp where they knew the boys would be. When they got to the camp, there was a bit of fisticuffs. Paddy got off, apparently. He escaped. Sammy jumped on his horse and took off for his life because he thought, I'm going to get shot here. There was some gunshots, and Sam just kept riding. He didn't turn around, he didn't go back, he wasn't chased. He didn't see Patrick come back. He said he didn't see him. He said, I didn't see who came back, I just heard some gunshots. So when he got back to the town, he got a huge manhunt to start up. But it was 2 months, I think, before they managed to catch the boys. So they did go back. The manhunt ended up back to where Sam said that the shooting had taken place. Again, that took a little while. We're not talking, within an hour they were back at the spot. We're talking about the days where you're on horse. So it took them a while to get back to the spot where the shooting had taken place. And when they did get back there, they found Constable's Doyle's horse and Darky's horse, and their saddlebags were overflowing, so to speak. And they decided, we better have a bit of a look in here and see what's going on. And they opened up the saddlebags, and it was the charred remains, so they believe, of Doyle and Darky. They'd obviously, according to the police, they had been shot, murdered, and then burnt on a fire on a piece of rock here in this area. This is actually an actual photo of the area where the bodies were found. There's some Aboriginal trackers there on their horses. They were said to have burnt the bodies in the fire, which I will circle for you in a second so you can see exactly where it was. There you go. So anyway, reward out. Right, let's get these bastards. $1,000 reward was given. Jimmy and Paddy were on the run. No one could find them, and well, they did eventually. 2 months later, they were taken. The boys, once they were captured, they were taken to the Boggo Road jail, where they had to wait to be trialled. And as the trial went on and started, there was 500 people on the day that the boys were taken from the Boggo Road jail. They were removed from there, taken to the courthouse, and the people that were waiting out, like we're talking crowds of hundreds, apparently over 500 people at the front of the courthouse waiting to get a glimpse of the Kenneth brothers, which they did, and they cheered the Kenneth brothers. Because much like the Kelly gang, to the normal fellow, the people with no money, the battlers, these fellas were heroes because they were giving it back to the rich, causing trouble for the rich and helping out the less fortunate. So they were pretty popular. But the evidence given at the trial seemed to be enough to sway the jury. The trial took place with the Kenneth family present. So Mum and Dad and their big brother John were present. His sister was there. Everyone was there to see the trial. The judge was Mr. Griffith, who was by all accounts a very fair man, a fair judge. In fact, it was he that intervened and said that he didn't think James, the younger one, that there was enough evidence to actually put him to death. And he had similar thoughts on Paddy. But as it turns out, unfortunately, they did put Paddy to death. They sentenced him to hang. James, on the other hand, got a life in prison, but he got out after 12 years, or 14 I think it was. I'll tell you in a minute. But anyway, long story short, poor fella Patrick did hang. he did, you know how men have their last words, etc. He did still, when he was hung, say that he did not do it. He was an innocent man. So now when Jim got out of jail, he too, like even his whole time in jail, said, Paddy and I didn't kill anybody, it wasn't us. Apparently the Truth newspaper back in those days received a letter from somebody who claimed to be the killer and said that the boys were put in jail, you know, and it wasn't them, it was him. So when Jim got out, he said that the mystery letter writer was the killer who should have been hanged, not his brother Pat. So it is a pretty extreme crime, and one does, I mean, it's really extreme. It's a horrible crime, but given the boys had never murdered anyone before and were only ever wanted for horse thievery, it's pretty extreme. But anyway, that's the story in very short. It's a lot more to it than that, but for the sake of this video and not boring you too much, that is the story of the Kenneth brothers. On a lighter note, a possum walking through heard some noises rustling in the tree, a few little squeaky squawkies, and we looked up to see this little fellow, thinking, oh my God, because they're nocturnal, of course, you shine a light in their eyes, the poor little things suffer. We worked that out quick enough, and that's a possum. Now, I would really love everybody, please, to check out my friends' channels. The beautiful Cassie at Weeping Willow, Jason at the Cemetery Road, Crow of Judas, Lebby, Chasing the Darkness, Matt, Devil's Hour Productions, and Joe at Entity 7 Paranormal. All my friends, all great people. Please go and check out their channels and enjoy their content. Thanks for watching.